What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to and breaking down the Myriad Celestia trailer, Fables About The Stars, Part 1. Originally, I was intending to react to all of the Myriad Celestia trailers in this video, but I'm actually recording this after reacting and breaking down this video because I did something that's a little silly, and I spent an hour talking about this 4-minute trailer. I did not expect when I sat down today to record that I would have as much that I did to say about this trailer, but I think I said a lot of nice things, and with how long I talked about it, I felt that it would be better if I separated things here and just did the rest of the Myriad Celestia trailers in their own video, which I feel like is fine given that they sort of have a slightly different vibe from this original trailer. With that, I am not going to belabor any further, and I'm going to leave past me to explain anything else before we get into the video. If you want to understand how I'm looking at these, check out my other videos. Most of them I explain it, my criteria for what I like in a trailer. Obviously these are a little different because they are the more 2D animated style. These are less likely so the first things that people are going to be seeing if they're not familiar with the game. They're more likely to put the character trailers as an ad than they are a Myriad Celestia trailer. Regardless, these are going to be getting a lot more into the lore, so we're going to be able to get a little more nitty-gritty into the lore of the world and some potential theory crafting on that. Let's just jump right into it. Myriad Celestia trailer, Fables About the Stars, Part 1, which before we even start, the fact that it's labeled Part 1 interests me. I'm very curious if/when we will get a Part 2 to this. We'll go through it once, and then I'll go back through it with more of my thoughts.
Let's make an exchange, shall we?
When I first saw this, I was so intrigued by Black Swan. I expected her to be much more of a Dainsleif type character, and who knows, maybe she will be, but I did not expect her to be as relevant as she is in Penacony. But yeah, no, because when this first came out, I very much thought that this was going to be sort of in line with the Genshin, like, chapter run-through thing. I'm forgetting what it's actually called, but regardless. I love the framing of all this. I love all of the ways they present the Aeons, as this really was our first, like, proper look at all the Aeons, I'd say.
With vicious destruction. But be not dismayed, O child of the world. The Luck's arrow will descend to purge the wicked abominations. You must follow the traces left behind.
Black Swan's narration over all of this is very interesting to me, as it sort of flows between the vibes of all of the different Aeons.
The roots that connect all things.
I love that they don't immediately show us Noose and even just sort of keep them in a little bit of shadow and more focus on the Genius Society here. It's really good.
Let your staff strike the earth, they say.
God, this flows so well. Just like the way it transitions between each of them is really interesting to me. There's these like musical stylizations and motifs and stuff in here that are keeping it as like sort of a whole entity of a singular song, but it flows in feeling and energy to perfectly match each of the things.
Your soul, nor numb your stride. Open the majestic gates, they say, and lift up the tablets of lapis.
I love the sort of energy of it with this part. I don't know why, but something about how just heavy the music hits, and then it comes to this more calm vibe. I love all of the sort of overlaying of voices the one time that it is sort of more than just Black Swan talking.
Listen to the beating of billions upon billions of hearts.
I also just love the design of all of the Aeons.
Look upon the quarters
And I'd say honestly this is my favorite part of, as it much more quickly sort of jumps one after another between the other aeons, because they are still important even if they aren't like paths. And this really interests me here.
To heart. This is the path you should walk, they say. Machiavelli, depart once more. Machiavelli.
And then it returns to Black Swan.
Countless shooting stars streak the sky tonight. Should you choose the right one, it will carry your wish to thousands of distant worlds.
Yeah. Now, I realized I did not have the subtitles on that entire time. Oops. But we're going to be going through it again, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. So yeah, now, much more with a critical eye.
Shall we?
Starts with a memory exchange. Makes sense, she's a memo keeper after all. I like this opening on this being basically just this weird astral cradle of a space that is where we always meet the Aeons. Or have contact with them at least. Now, I'd like to take note of a couple of the things that she says here, because it could simultaneously have a lot of meaning, but also maybe not nearly as much as a lot of people think. I've seen a lot of people with these next few lines get really caught up in the exact words being used and extrapolating things from that, which in my mind isn't necessarily meant to be anything, but who knows, maybe it is. Just my opinion. But obviously, the Nameless One very possibly could be alluding to the fact that the people of the Astral Express and the Trailblaze are known as the Nameless. And then the Pathless One, I don't know who that would be necessarily referring to. It could be referring to us, given that we follow multiple different paths, like being able to change from destruction to preservation and stuff, but it also could be referring to someone else or just a more general thing, I don't know. But there's a lot of these lines that I think we aren't really even meant to understand yet, but they are interesting lines. And this is sort of what I was talking about of, I've seen a lot of people go, oh, she said March. That must be referring to March 7th. And I don't know why that would be the case. I mean, it might be, but I don't think it makes sense that just because she says the word March, it's a word. But anyways, this part interests me, though. It says, go now, march unwaveringly into solar wind. At the end you will return to my embrace, but march towards the light. Now, this line intrigues me. Once again, I don't really know what it's specifically saying, but I feel like either throughout a lot of this trailer, Black Swan is talking specifically about herself, at which point I have a feeling she will be actually consistently more relevant, because I have a feeling that actually a few Penacony characters could continue to be relevant post-Penacony, her being one of the big ones. But I feel like the other potential interpretation is that she's more reciting a fable, given the title of the trailer being Fables About the Stars. And if that's the case, we have no real way of knowing who the me or I that she is embodying is in this case. It could be anyone, honestly. I don't know. But I think it's more just interesting, but not something that we really can understand yet, without maybe another one of these or just more story. And then moving through all of the Aeons, starting with Nanook the Destruction. And I find it really cool that they give little hard to catch blurbs, honestly, with each one, which are sort of descriptions, sort of not. I'll read them regardless and see what we can parse from them. At the universe's core lies a flame. It burns ever so intensely, till entire galaxies are incinerated, for the sole purpose of embracing a splendid destruction at the end of all reality. Yeah, no, so this, I guess, is really just honestly embodying the path of destruction as an ideal of the belief that, as it says, the core of the universe is a flame and it burns intensely, burning away galaxies. And that embracing that flame, that destruction, is important. It paints things in an interesting light, though it is, in many ways, sort of an insane, apocalyptic way of viewing the world. It is the kind of thing that you could see a certain religious reverie attached to it when thinking about it this way, and the idea of embracing destruction as all things end, as they inevitably will, which is interesting. We then get the lines, yet that light begins to burn.
Clouds as a golden death.
Yeah, and golden death is interesting given that, I mean, it pretty much just ties to Nanook with like his golden blood that we can see and all that stuff. The embodiment of destruction. Then we have the hunt. In part, it's annoying that it's so hard to read, but I feel like it actually fits the vibe of these being almost ancient texts that are being read in whatever state they are in rather than well-kept things. I don't know how to describe it. So for the hunt, though, it is, for the first 10,000 years, the hunters struggle for survival. In the second 10,000 years, the hunters fight out of anger. The third 10,000 years, the hunt becomes a purpose in of itself, for itself, something along those lines. Can't really make out some of those last words. I really like this. I really like how this differs from the Destruction one, where the Destruction one was sort of reciting a creation/destruction tale of the universe. This is sort of a historical moral telling of the way of the hunt. Of that, over the many millennia, people have had their reasons for fighting. First for survival, first out of anger at each other, at themselves, against whatever, but that in the third 10,000 years, the purpose of the hunt is the hunt itself. Once again, it's that sort of religious reverie, which is fitting given that these are essentially gods. We've moved past just fighting for survival. We've moved past fighting out of anger. And now we were fighting and hunting for the purpose of it. The just pure importance of it. Yeah, and I find the wording here very fun, given stuff with the Xianzhou. The Lux Arrow will rain down to purge the wicked abominations, given that, based on the game's story, in all likelihood, what that's directly referring to is that of the abominations of the abundance, as the Xianzhou would put it, which is just a sort of nice reference point to what some of the story deals with. And then the erudition, which, interestingly enough, the words are much more easy to make out here, which is interesting to me given that Nous, the erudition, is tied to knowledge and intelligence and all that kind of stuff. If the truth of the universe is cruel and stale, would you still yearn for the answer? The knowledge seeker is impassive, for their core has been cold and unwavering since its birth, as cold as the end of the path they seek. Interesting. Yeah, okay. I like sort of the fact that, once again, this is a slightly different angle than the previous two. This time, rather than a historical telling or a calling of the end times, this is setting up a moral quandary of sorts, which is perfect for a path relating to knowledge and intellect and meaning, as the creation of Nous came from geniuses seeking answers of things. But if the truth of the universe is cruel and stale and cold, uncaring, is that an answer that you want to learn? For some people, yes. Others, no. But I suppose that is the question for those who are considering going down the path of erudition. Because I imagine most people who truly follow the path of erudition, not like in the way of characters in the game are an erudition character, but people in universe who follow the path of Nous. I imagine for most of them the answer is yes, they would want to find the answer. But then it comes around with the next bit. The knowledge seeker themselves is impassive, or their core has been unwavering since its birth. Saying almost that to want a cruel and uncaring answer, you need to be willing to, or not even willing, just be, from the start, capable of being as impassive and as cold. It's almost saying that to truly follow the path of erudition, to truly find the answers that one might seek of the universe, you can't be an impassioned person who cares for every little thing around you. You need to have some innate separateness from it, a little bit of coldness, to be able to truly reach the end. Some people might be able to care and be a warm person and follow the path of erudition, but to reach the end. If we're going by what this is saying, you'd have to be just as cold as the path itself, as the Aeon itself. A machine that exists to understand the universe, not necessarily to live in it.
The Celestial One guards their secret.
Yeah, the Celestial One guards their secret. I want to actually jump back to see the couple lines before that to tie this in, because it all sort of flows together one to the next.
The
The Lux Arrow will descend. We already talked about this line.
Wicked abominations.
You must follow the traces left behind in the storm's wake. So following the traces, searching for answers. But the Celestial One guards their secrets, blotting out the roots that connect all things. So the Celestial One. In all likelihood, given the current framing, that's Nous, the Aeon, a god, basically. And the they that is being talked about, I'd imagine, is the Genius Society, or maybe the universe itself. One of the two, maybe both. But then in the same phrase is plotting out the roots that connect all things. So in that case, it's saying that the secrets of the universe that have been learned, Nous protects and keeps hidden from certain people, at least. Perhaps those who aren't ready for those answers or who would abuse them, who knows. But that at the same time, they are trying to learn more, trying to connect everything. Interesting.
But they are silent, like a shroud of mist at the center of the...
Yeah, and then comparing them to the silent, mysterious mist at the center of the universe. Yeah, okay, yeah. From everything we've seen of Nous, I think this is a great framing of him. Or it, even, if it is beyond, perhaps, ideas of self-identity. Who knows? I guess we'll maybe find out at some point.
Listen to the silence, and you will know where the stars...
Yeah, okay. To bring it all together, though, there at the end. Nous is silent. He's protecting the secrets of the universe, of the Genius Society, whatever the secrets may be. But if you listen to that silence, really infer from it what meaning there is, you'll understand as well. I feel like this is once again a welcoming or challenging of people who would follow the erudition.
Are resting.
Which, yeah, no, that's great.
Let your staff
But then we move into Yaoshi. Once again, this is a little easier to read, but still is a little faded in places. She feels sad, for eternal life did not let her accumulate infinite wisdom. Instead, those she had once cherished faded into obscurity over time, never to return. Interesting. Yeah, okay. Once again, slightly different angle, taking a very directly personal one. Perhaps the she in this is Yaoshi, perhaps it is a follower of the abundance, or perhaps it's more meant to be ambiguous than that. More a disambiguation, a more collective identity for all of those who live longer than those around them. I find it really interesting that where all of the others have been some form of acknowledging and accepting the nature of their path, there is an innate sorrow and tragedy in the description of the abundance. The abundance gives life. It gives eternal life. But it does not give wisdom. It does not give companionship. For those around you who do not share in those gifts, they cannot follow you, and you will be left alone. It's hammering straight home into the eternal moral quandary of eternal life. Something that is touched on in the story of the Xianzhou, however well or not, depending on your opinion on that story, but regardless, it's a theme that they keep hitting on with the abundance. It is the abundance, it is plentiful, its gifts are many, but they always have a sourness to them. Perhaps even a bitterness, perhaps even a poisonedness, depending on circumstance. And then, I believe, I'm not going to worry about going back and trying to find it, but I believe this is where the running wording of they say comes in. As I mentioned earlier, there was a much more personal first person me, I, second person you, referring like I am talking to you thing that may be a direct thing of Black Swan talking to us or something different. But then there's the they added in here, which once again I'm curious to see how that actually ties into all this, because I don't know necessarily how it does. But I just wanted to point it out because it comes up a few times going throughout here.
This will rid you of sickness and poison.
Yeah, and then we have that reference to being rid of sickness and poison, and branches growing to the skies and their sap falling, and we have Yaoshi holding what looks like a berry, but then also has the same exact look as the things embedded in her arms and hands, which might be berries. Like, actually, I'm realizing that there's one spot on her other arm where there would be one, but there isn't. Perhaps it is, there are berries growing out of her, or something along those lines. But I also can't help but look at the spots on her arms and hand where they are and not think they look like eyes. Which, when you also pair with, like, the mini arms and stuff, and the long fingernails, gives not a full Eldritch vibe, but it gives me a little bit of, like, biblically accurate angel type vibe, which I like as a touch. It doesn't linger on the abundance long, then goes to the nihility. Really straightforward with this one. All progress toward the void. All resist the void. All will become. I believe it's really fitting that the nihility is the briefest one. It doesn't need moral pontificating. It doesn't need personal identification. It doesn't need history. All it needs is the void, and to acknowledge the fact that that is where all things go. All things try to avoid it, try to resist it, but it is where they go, what they become. And I just think that's great. As well as the lines here, especially how Black Swan says them. Blindfold your eyes.
They say.
Once again with
Let
that
the
they
approaching
say.
Darkness may strike no fear in you. Let it not burden your soul.
Yeah, so to break down that line a little bit, because I love it actually just so much. What I get from that is that the world is an impossibly cruel, nihilistic place. Everything will be destroyed and consumed one day. But unlike the destruction that revels in it, the roaring flame of destruction, this is more talking about that eating, biting darkness at the end of everything. The little cruelties that make up everything, but also destroy everything. As we can see with IX being a black hole, but that houses galaxies. It is everything, yet it destroys everything. And I just love it as visual imagery and everything, because the idea that if you see the world, reality, as it is, it will burden you. It will burden your soul. But if you blindfold yourself, blind yourself, you will not see the approaching dark. It will not strike fear into you. Now, is that a good thing? To blindly wander through the universe without understanding how utterly crushing everything is? Maybe, maybe not. It's a good question. Not one I think I'm fit to answer. I love that it doesn't really say that this is what you should do. Well, it does. It does. It says that you should blind yourself so it won't burden your soul. But to me, it feels more like an allowance rather than a suggestion or request, if that makes any sense. It's that if you just constantly look into the abyss, it will look back into you and you will be consumed by it. What I'm coming to this with, which is colored by my own views, but regardless, is that it's okay to know and understand the darkness of reality, but you need to not necessarily accept it. Don't become cruel and cold necessarily, but it's okay to look away from it at times. Okay to not look into the darkness always. But then they move on to the preservation, and once again we get the they say. Once again we have a much more faded one. I'm curious to see if... I don't know enough about the exact timeline of Star Rail to know this exactly, but I'm curious if the ones that are more faded are of Aeons that are older, having more faded. But no, I don't think so, because I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I think the Destruction is one of the newest, and it was one of the more faded ones, like not the most, but still. But regardless, the philosophers gaze up at the sky, contemplating civilization's ultimate goal, build a wall. The resounding echo rings within their heads, build a wall. I'm intrigued by this, because, at least on first reading it here, well, it's not my first time reading it, but first time really thinking about it, I don't know if I fully understand it, but I'm going to try to talk it out to see if I can. The preservation. Something strong, something sturdy, something that constructs, something that ponders, something that is slow. Philosophers gazing to the sky, contemplating the goal of civilization being build a wall. I don't know necessarily what to make of that, because when I think of building a wall, I think of barriers, I think of cutting yourself off from other things, I think of, well, walls. But in another sense, perhaps to get more in the mind of preservation, of protection, a wall is something that defends, it guards. it puts a protective barrier between me and something dangerous. So perhaps this is saying that the ultimate goal of civilization is to defend itself, to protect itself from that which is beyond civilization? I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, it's a strong sentiment to want to protect yourself and those you care about, defend, to maintain the things that you hold dear. I can't escape the fact that building a wall is a separation. Now, if this is talking about civilization in an individual civilization's sense, of like each individual civilization's ultimate goal is to build up its walls, protect itself, cut itself off, then I have issues with that. I feel that that is something complicated. That if that is the intent of this, I feel like there inevitably will be stuff related to that will inevitably unpack in the story. But if it's talking about the fundamental concept of civilization and its ultimate goal of protecting itself, preserving itself, ensuring its continued survival, then that's a bit more complicated for me. Because preserving that what you care about, whether that's yourself, others, your way of life, that is important. That is incredibly important. Preserving everything isn't necessarily good. There are a lot of things that shouldn't be preserved in the world. But if we're taking this on a more fundamental level, then I think I can agree with it. I think in that sense I can understand the final line of, despite the philosophers contemplating this, perhaps doing what I am currently doing, not fully understanding this goal, but trying to, they can't escape just the ringing thought of building that wall. We may not understand why we do it. We may not understand what we're defending ourselves against, but we do understand that we do need to defend ourselves. And now when I say that, I connect this back to the fact that we were just coming from nihility, from the inevitable end of all things. Because though the end of all things may be inevitable, though everything may end someday, there are things that are worth protecting, to preserve, for as long as we can. And so maybe though civilization will end someday, it's worth trying to preserve. I like that. I think that sits well with me.
The tablets of lapis. Read them aloud. Let the fire that forged the bricks and the ones that laid the walls' foundations.
Yeah, now I also like that, because once again in this idea of preservation, push open the majestic gates, they say, and lift up the tablets of lapis. Read them aloud. Let the fire that forged the bricks and the ones that laid the walls' foundations be known. Yeah, okay. So, very much that idea of there are things worth preserving, things worth remembering, is what we're really getting to this. It's not just the physical defense or preservation, it's the memory of it all. It's understanding that people before me built up everything that I take for granted now. And in remembering them and honoring them, it grants their acts meaning, and it informs my view of everything around me. By preserving that knowledge and that understanding and all of that, it helps to understand my place in everything. I think that might be what this is getting at. I could be completely off base, but I think that works. And then we have the harmony. Behold, a perfect home, no sorrows, no disobedience, no longings unfulfilled, no memories of agony. How enviable. If I had read this before Penacony started, I don't think I would have known exactly what to make of it. But given the planet of festivities, the beautiful dream, and all the raised questions of whether or not that dream is a good thing, whether or not having a place with no sorrows, disobedience, longings, pain, agony, if having a place like that existing is a good thing, as it is enviable. An idyllic place like that is what everyone hopes for, everyone strives for. Somewhere where they can be eternally happy, eternally in line with everything, eternally being able to get along with everyone. But there is that other side of it, of that no disobedience is a very specific word choice. It's not no strife, it's not no conflict, it's no disobedience, implying complete obedience, which means a surrendering of freedom. And in line with that, a place with no sorrows. no memories of agony, no longings unfulfilled. These are all things that every person wishes to be able to achieve, but fundamentally can't. In my opinion, at least, a human who lives their life without any of these, without any sorrows, no unfulfilled longings, wishes, no unfortunate memories, isn't really a full human being, I'd say. Because, I mean, to speak of myself a little bit, I have a lot less life experience than most people, I'd say. But even then, I have my bad memories, my sorrows, my unfulfilled longing. And for good or bad, they shape my view of the world. Something I've really come to realize as of late is that even though I have many regrets, even though there are a lot of things that I wish I had done differently, I wish that hadn't happened, I wish could be better, they've brought me to where I am today, which, to be a little more humorous about things, I guess is here on this YouTube channel, which, hey, I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's where I am. And once again, for better or for worse, it's where I've been brought to. And if I lived in a world without sorrows or unfortunate memories of agony, I wouldn't necessarily say my life goes that far, but without these things, I would have never bothered attempting to do something like this, to start a channel, to be talking to all of you like this, essentially pouring my heart out a little bit. I wouldn't do that if I could just sit at home doing whatever I want at any point in my life, not needing to worry about the future, not needing to worry about the past, any of that. Now, all this is to say that though this description is speaking to the almost beauty and enviable perfect nature of this, given Penacony and the themes that seem to be tied throughout all of Penacony's story, I don't think this is meant to be something that is to be expected to be able to happen. I don't think this is something that can truly be achieved. Those who follow the harmony, in this case, people like Sunday perhaps, are seeking something that in many ways is antithetical to the human experience. And perhaps that's where, for characters like Sunday and to characters like Robin, the complex nature of reality grinds against them. They are seeking out this perfect state of being where everyone is happy in their own ways. But in Penacony's story are being forced to realize that it's not that simple.
Then they say, "Oh, you who have reached the end, enter into the paradise that envelops all."
Alongside that description, we have these lines here talking about reaching the end and entering paradise that envelops all. This gives me the thought of the concept of heaven and the idea that at the end of all things, we will reach that idealized, impossible world where everything is perfect. And I suppose in this case, much like the promise of heaven or enlightenment or whatever state of final bliss, whatever religion you're talking about entails, I suppose this is what the harmony promises. And I think we might be able to see in the future of Penacony if Star Rail's answer is if that is something that can be achieved, if that is something that can happen, or at the very least, if it's something that can be achieved without too high a price. This makes me so excited for the future story. Now, this is the last one, I believe, that has like a full description, a full dedicated series of lines, but I'm going to see what I can get out of the rest of these as well.
Look upon the courtesans.
Yeah, so we just get no description here, but very notable to look at the subtitles for this, the captions. We begin to have things in parentheses that aren't stated but are given to us in the subtitles themselves, something more understated, a secret to what is being said, perhaps. Look upon the courtesan's extravagance, hedonism. Now, with this, I find it interesting that it isn't just the nature of the path itself that is being referenced, but rather another perspective on it, another way to look at things, another interpretation. In this case, I find it interesting to connect hedonism to the elation, because in many ways I believe it makes sense given the Masked Fools and the elation itself, in the sense that it is basically laughing at the world and having fun, taking joy in everything regardless of the actual meaning behind it. If I'm interpreting what I've seen of the elation correctly, at least. Which is interesting, because framing it as hedonism, specifically, is correct. Like, objectively so, that is what it is. It's indulging in the pleasures of reality, in many cases, without regard for what it means to those around you. I mean, hell, look at everything Sparkle's doing. I have a feeling that's not going to be good for a lot of people. But maybe it will be. Who knows? Sampo helped out quite a bit. But regardless, from a, definitional standpoint, it is hedonism to indulge in the way that those of the elation do. But usually, hedonism has a relatively negative reputation, which leads me to wonder what the continued relevance of the elation will be throughout the story, because so far we really have two ties to the elation, being Sampo and Sparkle, as I mentioned. In Sampo's case, he basically helped us, saving us on a couple occasions, and depending on how much credit you give him, potentially sort of orchestrating events to a degree. And then, in the case of Sparkle, it's sort of hard to say where her motives lie, because clearly she's just sort of having fun and doing the thing of what the Masked Fools do, but we don't know if it's malicious or not yet, because she did sort of push Aventurine in a certain direction, give him certain hints, but we don't know yet if that is for good or ill, for malicious pleasure, or just a more benevolent, joyful watching of the unfurling story, as she has often compared herself to a side character, to someone in a story, a play. Perhaps she just wants to see the story unfold in the most satisfying way possible. I'm really curious to see if the elation is meant to be something good, like a force of good, a force of evil, something more in between, something more complicated, something that varies from person to person who follows the path. I'm really curious. But then we get the veracity, which, I mean, veracity, gluttony, that's once again a very definitional comparison. It's basically just synonyms. Yeah, I don't necessarily have as much to say about this one just because it doesn't have as much direct connection to the core thematics of the story necessarily, at least currently. Maybe it will, but we'll see. Then that goes into the beauty, which we then get two things. We get the waves being flapping wings as they enter the dream consciousness. It's really interesting to me that these are the underlying terms connected to the beauty, because I connect these much more with the remembrance. The flapping wings to the waves I don't as much understand. Don't necessarily know what that's making reference to. The waves entering the dream is a piece of imagery we've gotten multiple times over now in our time related to the Remembrance and in Penacony, as Black Swan has on multiple times compared memories and dreams to that of an ocean. Multiple characters have, even. Though I don't know what the flapping wings are necessarily in reference to. The idea of the waves entering the dream, which is our consciousness, is interesting to me, and I just actually want to jump back to get the first bit of this. Yeah, okay. Oh, interesting. I didn't even catch this. Listen to the infant in the mirror, the end of all things. The infant is the end of all things. Who is this talking about? This really interests me. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I think this honestly might have a little bit more to do with the veracity, maybe, given that we're still on the visuals of it. Based on at least the way they've written the subtitles here, it's framed that this is the start of the sentence, and this is the continuation of the sentence. But it is sort of disconnected. Listen to the infant, end of all things, in the mirror, the waves as they enter the dream. And then what does this finish with? Does it just go to the next part? It does, it does. Infant in the mirror, waves it entering the dream. The end of all things in the mirror, flapping wings as they enter consciousness. That's how this is meant to be read. I don't fully understand it. Maybe I just don't have all the pieces. Or maybe I'm just missing something. But above all else, I don't know how this connects to the beauty. I'm really curious to see if we ever find out.
As they enter the dream.
Oh, and okay, interesting. I guess maybe this also has ties to the propagation. At which point, maybe the flapping wings are in reference to the fact that all the propagation stuff is in line with insectile stuff with like wings and things. I don't know.
The tipping of the
And then this one's really interesting to me. Less so in the sense of what it means for Star Rail specifically, but more so for, if you're familiar with the other games of Hoyoverse, this continued thematic presence of a samsara. And in this case, it being tied to the enigmata and the idea of the tipping of the balance, with that balance being the samsara. If I'm taking this in line with how it's used in the other games, the samsara is this continuing loop, this repeating cycle, and the tipping of the balance, the altering of that samsara, perhaps the breaking of it, is something that's come up in pretty much all of their games so far. I imagine that, in all likelihood, I'm almost predicting even, that at some point in the story, we will probably have a storyline that deeply involves the enigmata, or at the very least some kind of samsara-related storyline or plot beat, and then involves the breaking of that samsara, that balance. I don't know when it will happen, or how it will happen, but I've noticed that it's something that is a sort of continuous through line in their games. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. And then with the equilibrium, we have the shapeless prince against the current. Huh. Once again, I'm not entirely sure how this ties to the path it's referencing, if it even is referencing this path. It's possible that this is actually just naming off in the visuals each of these remaining aeons, while also just giving us, in the lines being given, a separate thing, referencing to stuff in the lore in the story. But any connections I can find, I'll try to point out. I don't know who the Shapeless Prince is. Perhaps that's something related to the equilibrium that I just don't know the lore of. There's a lot of gaps in my knowledge of the lore. I haven't bothered reading through, like, all of the codex. But reading against the current, I don't think necessarily, like, how I've interpreted some of these other things, that it's a direct, like, synonym to something else in the sentence. But it does inevitably make me think of the idea of the tipping of the balance and the imagery of waves entering the dream. I have a feeling that's going to be a continual through line of the game. Of memory, of dreams, of consciousness, of cycles, of those cycles being broken or changed or continuing despite that. I have a feeling this might be a through line of the game, and I'm only really realizing that now. And then we get to Fuli, To the Remembrance. I find it really interesting that we don't get a full card for Fuli in the same way that we did all of the others. But it sort of makes sense, given that, in a way, all of this is a trailer of Fuli's. As being the remembrance, they are the one who recalls all of this. And as it says, then finally, you can measure the world against yourself and take all such things to heart. I find this next line really, really interesting, as none of the past bits here have told us what path to follow, what to do. In my interpretation, at least, been much more glimpses into the lives and worlds and understandings of reality of those who follow these paths. But then at the end here, it tells us this is the path you should go. And the word path is important, given that these are all the paths of the aeons that are to be followed. To walk a path is to join with the philosophy of whatever aeon you're talking about.
Path you should walk, they say.
But then it's with that they say at the end, which, with that at the end, I suppose makes it, once again, this framed device of, we have given you a glimpse of every path, how it views the world. And each one is telling you, this is how the world is, this is how reality should be, or how it already is, and that you should believe that too. But that's what they say. And then we get to this next bit, directly acknowledging Machiavelli, and in line with that, the Trailblazer, more specifically at least. Depart once more, connecting the worlds.
Machiavelli.
And there isn't any they say there.
Countless.
With that one, it isn't a request, it isn't a framing device, it's more of an urging, I feel.
Shooting stars streak the sky tonight. Should you choose the right one, it will carry your wish to thousands of distant worlds.
Yeah. And then that end bit there, sort of in line with what I was just talking about, with like, everyone is telling you how the world is, how it should be, what you should do, what you should believe. But there are countless stars in the sky. And if you pick the right one, I'm not telling you which one is right, but if you do pick the right one, your wish, whatever that might be, will reach thousands of worlds. And I think that's just first off an amazing philosophical, ideological thing to consider, to think about, because I feel like there is a certain truth to that. But then it also works really well for this game, given that from the beginning we've been having these framing devices of lines like, make a choice you won't regret. Make sure that you do not regret your choices. Be confident in your decisions, your choices, everything. And though not to a massive degree, we can see that a little bit in comparing the structure of certain quests in Star Rail versus Genshin, in the sense of 99% of the time in Genshin, a voice line decision will not even change the next line of the person you're talking to. Where in Star Rail, I'd say 50, 60, 70% of the time maybe, it at the very least changes the next line, even if it doesn't change the full story. And occasionally, not often, but occasionally, changes the outcome of things. Especially in like story quests for characters and stuff. There are choices that actually matter and change things in this game. And perhaps we'll see more of those going forward in the main story. Maybe not, but perhaps. I mean, hell, the fact that there is a point early in the game where you can make a decision that ends the story, essentially. And then just, of course, because it's a live service game and you can't just load your save, it just backpedals you immediately before that. The fact that they did that shows us that the idea of choice, decision, and regrets are at the core of this story. Which is why I feel like this trailer is, in so many ways, the perfect way to introduce us to the story and world of Star Rail. And I love it. And then we get the logo, and that's it. I talked about this way longer than I expected to. I expected to just sort of smile, point out a couple cool visuals, maybe say some things I liked other than that, things I was curious about, some theories or whatever, but I guess I got a bit philosophical there, a bit too into the weeds, I guess. But I don't know, I like what I said, I like what I thought about all of this, and I like where it sort of points me to considering the story going forward. And I hope that all of you enjoyed some of my insights. It shouldn't be long until I get that to you as well. I'll try to get to it quick. I like this. I really, really like this, and it makes me even more excited for the future of Star Rail than I was when I first saw this, actually. Because when I first saw this, it was exciting, it was hype, it was cool to see. It gave me a lot of the same energy I got from some of the early, more wide-scoping trailers of Genshin's. I don't know, I mean, really, the core of what this tells me is that this isn't just a silly haha funny game that has us rooting through trash and stuff like that. It's a game that's trying to say something. Even if it's not trying to say something specific, it's trying to get us to think about things. It is something with themes and meaning. Which is a little weird to think about, that the big gacha game is potentially something with actual philosophical import, but it just makes me love it all that much more. I think that here with Noose and the Genius Society is a good place to sort of leave us at as we sort of ponder the meaning of all of this, trying to seek answers in this. Yeah. Well, with all that, I hope you all liked this video. This was a lot more complex of a discussion than my previous videos, where I'm just been like, yeah, no, I like this, and this is cool, and I like the music. But I want to continue doing this when I find the opportunity. I want to look into the real storytelling, the real themes and meaning of everything in this game and other games. And this is the first time I've really been able to do that, I feel. But until next time, like I said, I hope you liked the video. Like it, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Leave a comment if you think I am way off the mark here, or if you agree with me. And I hope you all have a great day. Bye!